Do you love the beach? Do you love its ever-changing moods and wish you could capture it? What I'm about to show you isn't found in any watercolor book because I discovered it by accident when everything went wrong. A mistimed brushstroke created the most realistic crashing waves I'd ever seen, and now it's my secret to painting realistic crashing waves. I'll show you how to make a backwash, which is normally considered a mistake in watercolor, into an asset. Here are the paints I'll use in this painting. I've drawn a horizon line on this 9 by 12 inch Arches cold press 140-pound watercolor paper. The colors for the sky are going to be cobalt blue and raw umber. I'm working the sky wet into wet, and what I typically do is I wet the paper first. Now, I'm leaving some gaps to try to help define edges of clouds, but you don't have to do that. You can wet the whole sky and then work wet and wet with your pigments and still get some very nice effects. So try both ways. I'm dropping in clean water in the sky to make the clouds a little bit more fluffy by causing a backwash. This is the cloud after the water has pushed pigment aside. To get the blue color, I'm not just using pure cobalt blue. I'm using a little bit of raw umber mixed in with the cobalt blue on my palette and then dropping that onto the wet areas of the paper. The other thing that I'm doing to try to get some darker grays on the undersides of the clouds, or just because the clouds are so dense, is to add in even more raw umber into the cobalt blue, and you can see it really does create a nice gray. I'm going back and forth between using the bluer gray versus the grayer gray. Because I'm imagining that this is right before it's going to rain or about to rain, or it has finished raining, but the sky is still very, very humid and there's a lot of moisture in the atmosphere. I want the clouds to run down the paper towards the horizon. And that's why I'm tilting the paper. Another alternative you can use if you don't want to draw a line on your paper would be to put a piece of tape that would define your horizon line, and that will protect your eventual ocean from whatever it is you're doing in the sky. The advantage of that would be that you don't have a pencil line, and I just don't like pencil lines. You know, they're great for guides, but if there's no pigment on top of the pencil line, I like to erase it. Not all watercolor artists feel that way. I've seen plenty of pencil lines and really good artwork, but for some reason I just don't care for it. So for the land here, I'm painting the land in while the sky is still wet, and what that does is it gives the sort of a suggestion of trees in the distance because the branches are so far away. These colors are cobalt blue, raw umber, a little bit of shadow green, and a special gray that I've developed, which is Winsor violet, Indanthrone blue, and a little bit of Hansa yellow. Now I want to work on capturing the sparkling sun on the water. If you look at the way that I painted the clouds are heavier on the right side of the page. What this means is that there's more sunlight filtering through where there's just the white of the page. That's where I want to put the majority of the sparkles of water. The next thing that I need to let you know is that I'm using, or attempting to use, a dry brush technique. Notice how I'm holding the brush almost horizontally. So dry brush term can be a little misleading where it's like, well, if there's paint on it, how can it actually be dry? You're not literally using a dry brush. You are using a damp brush with some pigment on it, hopefully some pigment that's a little bit darker than you would expect, because what you want is the pigment to go down on the top of the tooth of the paper, and then that dark pigment contrasts with the valleys of the paper, and that will give you a sense of sparkle. When I was growing up, our family took our vacations at the seaside from the time, as long as I can remember. And ever since I started to do artwork and started to appreciate the colors that it took to create a seascape, I was always fascinated with the colors under the wave. So if you look at the waves, it's blue with maybe some gray foam on top, and then there's a green area. One of the things I noticed when we would visit different historical houses in New England is that a lot of the seascapes showed this as an even brighter green than you can see in this photo. And I've always tried to achieve that. Well, I'm going to show you a way to do that. I've developed a method that uses a backwash to create an illusion of crashing waves. The first thing to do is you want to lay down some wet paint, and you can see I've got a fairly dark value that I've put down. Next, you put down clean water and watch how that paint migrates upwards. This is before the water. This is just after I've applied the water. And a few minutes later. Now to get that green color where the sunlight's filtering through the wave, because the water's blue and you have a little bit of yellow color in the sunlight, you get green. Now mine's a lot more exaggerated than what I showed you in that photo, but I'm just having fun here. You can make it much more muted. So I'm working this for a while to continue to try to shape that wave. I'm also taking some more of the darker value of the cobalt blue back towards the horizon line to get those colors to work together a little bit better. The brush that I'm using has a tip so I can carefully place the water exactly where I want it. And pretty quickly you can see these backwashes form that I can then continue to shape to look like a crashing wave. Here I'm dropping in a little bit of Hansa yellow light to exaggerate the green in that wave even more. I'm darkening the water behind the wave further. I'm trying to use a dry brush technique here. I think the paper might be a little bit too wet. Later in the video, you'll see that I achieved the sparkle. Now I'm adding more water to the waves. You can see that backwash forming. With backwashes, you do have some time to play with it. So if you feel like you need more, go ahead and drop in a little more water. If it's not dry, it'll work. One of the tricks to continuing to shape these backwashes is you want to watch the wetness of the watercolor paper. If it's super, super wet, you might not get a backwash. Backwashes happen when you put a wetter brush onto damper paper. It doesn't have to be a lot different, just different enough where the water wants to run into the drier area on the paper. Meaning the water on the brush wants to run into the damper areas on the paper. So it's going from very wet to not as wet. To get the sense of foam in front of the wave as it's crashing, I'm just using this liner brush to create some kind of scumbling diamond shapes, and then dropping in some of that gray that's the cobalt blue and raw umber combination. And you can see that the backwash takes a little while to develop. So the paper's not dry. It's not drying quickly. So that's good. I can start to shape this wave a little bit better. Now it looks to me like there are fairly evenly spaced crashing waves, but that's not how it looks in nature. Though this is made up, and I didn't do a drawing because I wanted the water to do the work for me, or rather the watercolor to do the work for me. Well, I guess it is getting the water because I'm using the clean water to make the waves. I can put darker values next to these backwashes and then start to get that sense of shadow that happens as that wave is rolling over into itself. Here I'm using a dry brush technique with the smaller liner brush. Again, holding the brush just about horizontally to the paper to continue to develop the sparkle on the water. With the heavier clouds being on the right side of the composition, the water really needs to be darker there because the water will reflect what's in the sky.